Hi everyone, welcome to John and Tris Chats.
But again, runners don't need, really strong isolated strength. So if we talk a little bit about what it should include and then what it shouldn't include, should we do that?
Yeah. So we're going to look at
what mobility training should look like, probably not what you think, what your strength session should look like, and a little bit about plyometrics. And part two, I don't want to be too negative and say bad, I don't want to use the word bad, but how what I would suggest is not the best use of your time.
Yeah.
Let's talk about
that's good.
strength and conditions for runners. I think it's really well known. I think most runners are like, oh yeah, I should really do some strength and conditioning, but I feel it's poorly done on a whole. I think there's a really weird area with running or a big gaping black hole between strength and conditioners, physios, trying to preach about strength and conditioning but not really knowing much about running, and you've got runners who know a lot about running but maybe don't know much about strength and conditioning. And so you either get strength and conditioning programs from strength and conditioners that aren't runners, that look more like powerlifting and bodybuilding, or you get strength and conditioning programs from runners that are maybe just a little bit underloaded and not enough strength and conditioning processes going into them.
I like that. I think that's a really interesting point. I think that's absolutely right. But that's not unique to running. That's
That's just
the way of the world, isn't it? People stick to their strengths, right?
Yeah. But I feel like where hopefully we have a real niche is that definitely know a little bit about running, know a fair amount about strength and conditioning, but also a fair amount about biomechanics, where I think when people are doing one side or the other, this biomechanics just kind of gets lost at the door.
Yeah, and it's generic across all sports.
Yeah, exactly that.
But we also are involved in a lot of sports.
Yeah.
So actually quite a lot of crossover.
Want to run quicker? They're like, squat and clean. Want to swim quicker? Squat and clean.
Yeah.
So I think what good S&C looks like, and if we include mobility in that, because I think that's part of a strength and conditioning program. I don't think it's separate. I don't think it's mobility, stretching or anything like that. I don't think that's how you improve your mobility. I think it's how you set up your strength and conditioning. And so I think first of all, when we think about the aspects it should include, so when we're thinking about mobility, you don't need huge amounts of mobility to run. The range of movement you need, you don't need to verge too far away from neutral, you don't need anything to end range. But I think the biggest thing that people don't have mobility wise is to be able to lateralize their body either way. So with running, when you're in mid-stance left, your pelvis, your rib cage, your head, everything should be centered over that left leg. And then when you're in mid-stance on right side, same but on the other side. I think that's probably the biggest inability of runners. They'll normally have a dominant side where actually they go into right mid-stance, but their pelvis, their thorax and their head still look like they're in left mid-stance. So although they're contacting with the ground on the right, if you look from their pelvis up, it looks like they're still on the left, or vice versa. So I think that's probably the biggest elephant in the room with mobility. And again, it's not necessarily going after that and doing loads and loads of stretching or anything. It's about setting up your strength and conditioning, knowing your bias, and choosing exercise as well that promote those kind of aspects of mobility. When we think about mobility, and we'll go on to talk about the strength a little bit in the moment, the way we should think about things when we're trying to get more mobility and access to better positions and therefore more kind of muscle excursion, if you like, and therefore muscle force, is that we need to mimic these positions of lateralizing pelvis, rib cage, head over one leg. Not necessarily think too much about what the muscle is doing, because we know a muscle will react to the position we put our body in. So many times people are trying to can you feel it in your glutes? Just really try with your glutes. I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that. You put the pelvis, the rib cage, the knee, the foot in a position where we don't have the option of not using the glutes.
So it's not about you as a patient or whoever you are, individually trying
Yeah.
really. Although saying that, there are times where you do need to search for the position in order to make it more effective.
The search for joint position.
Yeah,
Not for glute contraction.
Yeah.
It's not like, I can feel the bottom 10% of my, you know, yeah.
That's a good point. I don't know if that was necessarily as clear as it could be.
Yeah. So, I mean, to summarise it, I think the biggest elephant in the room with mobility is the ability to lateralise one side to the other, and the main parts of that are getting your pelvis over your stance leg, and your thorax and kind of your head and neck following. And I think when we are setting up exercises, thinking about joint position as the kind of primary goal, and letting all the musculature kind of react from there. Yeah,
good point.
So I think there's definitely an aspect, and some of these will overlap depending on kind of your presentation, how much time you have, and who programs for you and everything. So there's definitely an aspect of getting your joints in nice positions where we can get over left leg and right leg. And then I think a big second part about, we'll put this in strengthening, but it's maybe that's maybe a bit too reductionist to call it strengthening.
You say put it in strengthening rather than what, mobility?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think these things will maybe look a little bit more like strengthening drills. But I think absolutely we need to kind of isolate muscles and get them really strong. But I think another real big part of where most running strength and conditioning programs are lacking is getting synergists or muscles that work together in different parts of running, training them together. So a very basic example of that is if we think about kind of the backside of our leg, we need the soleus and hamstring to work together quite nicely. You can do all the leg curls you want in the world, get really isolated, strong your hamstrings. Beneficial, but not the be all and end all. Same with the soleus. Unless you can get them to work together, then I don't think it's going to have much transfer to running. I think doing calf raises probably gets you very good at doing calf raises. I'm not entirely sure how much carryover that will have to running. Unless we learn to integrate that calf strength into the whole kind of kinetic chain. And I think although the exercises for that might look a little bit more like strengthening exercises, really we're thinking about coordination and a kind of neural pathway. Can the nervous system switch those two muscles on together?
What would be your top 2 or 3 exercises for hamstring soleus integration then?
Doing a progression of some sort of bridge with like a posterior tilt. So you're getting some hamstring and some plantar flexion. So that might just look on the floor that you're in a posterior tilt and you're just plantar flexing up from the floor. Different varying angles of knee flexion. Then you can put it on something a little bit more like unstable, so you can pulsate, put it on a foam roller or something. Probably the best use of a foam roller. We'll get there, things not to do. Really sensible. And then things like, I don't know if people know what I mean when I say it's like a Slayer slouch exercise we use quite a lot.
Check out Instagram. Check it. What about, I might be ruining your flow here, an RDL, understandably it's not a huge amount of soleus, but if you have your weight shifted forward, potentially a bit of soleus involved?
I would do things like RDL people, just a small isometric and heel coming up. No, you'd like it. They really like that. So not crazy amounts, like not going up onto your toes like a calf raise, like weight a little bit forward, push through your midfoot, and like a couple of sheets of paper can go under your heel, creating a little bit of isometric for your soleus, go through your RDL like hinge. Really sensible. So I think something like that's good. Like a soleus hamstringy integrated kind of bridge, very sensible. And people cry physical tears when you get them to do this the first time. But these are people that really strong with RDLs individually can do a really nice eccentric Nordic. calf raise for days, and those things are semi-sensible if you're really poor with isolated strength. But again, runners don't need really strong isolated strength in these, and so most runners probably have enough foundational strength isolated in these. And you tend to find that when people come to see me, we start to put them in these positions where we're trying to integrate muscles to work together. They really struggle, and they get cramp in these positions, and the nervous system will really let them know it's there. It will start shaking because it just can't tolerate. And I think that's a huge part where a lot of runners are missing out. So I think, hamstrings and soleus is a big one together. I think glutes and soleus, another big one. Glutes on one side of your hip and adductors on the other. So again, if we're thinking about the pelvis moving side to side, a glute's going to push you off one side, and the adductor on the other side is going to pull you over. So another big synergist there.
That's an interesting one that a lot of people would overlook.
The best ways of really thinking about that kind of synergy is loading the glute up as you normally do, and then on the other side trying to really get the pelvis up. So I think people think about adduction just about how the femur moves, but actually the better way to think about it is what the pelvis is doing. So if you can hike up one side, that's going to get a lot of adductor holding a hike. So you can load a glute, say on your right side, go into like a glute loaded position, and if you really hike up the other side, you're going to get a lot of adductor. So I think those two things can be, especially when you're short on time, if you've got someone really sensible planning, you can integrate those mobility and this kind of strength work, because you can put the body in positions that we know we're going to get the integration of muscles, and we're also going to get a nice looking, stacking over that leg. Either side.
Question from the audience, actually. I think people looking at this might go, okay, well, I can understand that strength training is going to give me some benefits when I'm running. I can see there's like evident benefit there, but you just said that there isn't a huge amount of range required for running. How's mobility really going to improve my running?
I think as we do in Performance Essentials, and we like to put ourselves in the middle between kind of pain and performance, very much so. From a performance side of things first, a muscle can only do what the joint position allows. So if we can maximise joint position, and that means kind of be able to get to both those positions we were talking about, the muscle is going to be able to go from a full excursion, so it's going to fully be able to shorten, it's going to be fully able to lengthen. And the difference between a lengthened and a shortened position is essentially your potential for force production, and vice versa. The difference between a shortened position and a lengthened position is your ability to absorb force. So if you can't get your joints, your bones in a nice position, you've got half the kind of muscle range, then your force production and your force absorption are going to be limited. And that kind of just carries over again into kind of the pain world. If we aren't able to absorb force through the kind of soft tissue, the muscle and the tendon, then the force is going to go elsewhere. So if you say your glutes can't adequately absorb force, then your hip's going to get more load.
So mobility.
Mobility.
Nailed that. Strength
work, and then PLYOs, which we've done a whole talk about. But again, you can go back and watch that here. Is it going to be there?
I can hope so.
Yeah.
So we'll link it here. Or down in the description.
Down there. Again, just really overemphasise, PLYOs don't have to be, the craziest looking exercise in the gym. Start with bouncing on your toes. We actually did a really good post with Cast down in Melbourne, Paramount Movement. Check that out. I think it was last weekend, on how you can try and bias one tendon more than another in PLYOs. So I think we went through kind of Achilles, quads or patella tendon, hamstrings and glutes. There's some really good options there. They don't have to be crazy, and it doesn't have to take a lot of time. You could probably get PLYOs done in a lot quicker time than your kind of strengthening work. But creating some kind of reflex in your tendons with plyometrics, very helpful. I think the thing with plyometrics is quite a lot of load. That's something you probably have to modify quite a lot through your season, depending on your training loads when you're tapering, what kind of races you've got.
Yeah.